Hi, welcome to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello. This one is going out to all the Wah Lum practitioners around the world.
It almost sounded like you were about to say this one goes out to all the lovers out there.
Actually, okay, I'll tell you what I really thought about is in Kendrick Lamar's song The Heart Part 5, he
Okay.
goes, this one goes out to all my fans, all my beautiful fans.
Oh,
something to
okay.
that effect.
I was thinking more like Quiet Storm.
Oh, yeah. This one goes
But
out.
this one does go out to all the Wah Lum practitioners out there.
Yes. So you said, hey, let's do a podcast, a MiOsc episode, to use your words.
MiOsc, first one of the year.
Most of the time you're like, hey, we're about to record. This time you said, hey, we're going to do a podcast. And I said, do I have like some time? Can I get 10 minutes to think about what
I
we
said,
want to talk
yeah,
about?
go. Timer starting now.
And so I said, you know what? Let's do one for the Wah Lum practitioners all over the world.
But this is not to be exclusionary of
No.
non-Wah Lum practitioners.
Of course.
Because if you are actually interested in, because people are like turning off right now,
Okay,
hitting the
now
stop
what?
button. My comics fans are like, what? But actually, if you're interested in like Chinese Kung Fu tradition and some of the philosophy, and also we're going to give some pro tips on getting a good New Year start. So there'll be some stuff for everyone, but it's a dedication.
Thank you, a dedication.
It's a dedication. So this is not just applicable to Wah Lum.
Where I wanted to start was where we've been discussing, because it's still recent, even from November, is this magical moment that happens every 3 years when Wah Lum Sifu certified instructors gather from across the planet and come to the Wah Lum headquarters in Orlando to certify, recertify as Wah Lum instructors. And maybe you could just give a small, we've talked about it before, but maybe just what that means.
Yes,
like every 3 years.
3 years, the Wah Lum Sifu group has a certification, and so we say recertify. It's re-up, basically not re-up.
Don't get us started on the wire, because
wire.
that is a rabbit hole.
Okay, so basically Grandmaster Chan started certification process to empower other instructors to be able to open their own schools. And so he then gives them the title of Sifu, but also licenses them to have a Wah Lum school to continue the art of Wah Lum and to continue that lineage and that instruction and teaching under the Wah Lum headquarters. And so every 3 years, the instructors come back and we train and we do testing that takes several days.
Right.
And it's pretty intensive. I'll drop a link to a previous episode of our Wah Lum test kind of review and summary, but it's a really intense weekend of training, but it's also like a ginormous family reunion. Right. And what happens there, the magic that happens there is that we are, oh God, this is a horrible analogy, but it's kind of like, a support group where you're the ones who know, right? We know what it's like to be teaching Kung Fu and Tai Chi day in and out. We're the ones that kind of are living and walking that path and living a certain lifestyle. And you really only get that kind of empathy from others who also live and walk that path. Right. And so it's this really nice moment where you kind of are able to talk amongst your peers as well as your aunts and uncles and people that have been in this longer, but also just without having to have too much explanation. Like we all know what we're going through at the same time. So it's a really amazing weekend. And to me, it's like a family reunion with a heck of a lot of Kung Fu.
Right. So knowing also that later on today, you're speaking with legendary strength coach Dan John.
Such a legend. And
I love saying that, legendary coach Dan John. Knowing that, it reminded me, since we're talking about that instructor certification, the first time that I heard him speak which is almost 11 years ago. And oh, thanks, you're going to fix my mic. Awesome. So the first time that I heard him speak, which is about 11 years ago, and it was amazing. It was awesome. He had the crowd in tears. He was in tears.
I remember you coming home from that and also calling me right after
standing
you heard
ovation
it.
to finish. I had read a lot of Dan John's work and followed him, but I've never heard him speak live. And I was just like, this guy is so awesome. But this is, speaking of a family reunion and people who can relate to each other, this was in a conference for coaches, fitness professionals, and his talk was on, the general theme was for coaches and how to coach. So he started off talking about how we're mentors to our students, and of course, being Dan John, he has to kind of go, Dan John, into epistemology. So he said, and this is
He's such a scholar.
Granted, remember, this is from notes that I wrote down on paper and 11 years ago. So I may not have it 100% right.
I'm going to ask him later, almost like a, hey, did we quote you wrong? I'm so sorry. Because I have a podcast recording with him in a couple hours.
But he talked about, hey, the word mentor comes from the Odyssey. It symbolizes guidance and wisdom. So as instructors or as coaches, we embody some key roles. And to be effective, we have to align ourselves with certain principles. And I thought this kind of aligned well with what we try to do as Wah Lum instructors. But number one, he talked about, who are you? Know your story, reflect your journey, your challenges, your achievements, your values.
You know, I just have to go, who are you? From The Princess Bride.
No one of consequence.
Inigo Montoya and Wesley. Okay, I'm sorry.
God, that movie is so good.
So good.
So good, A Princess Bride. Okay, so know your story, okay? When challenges arise, examine your prepositions. This is another thing that's just so Dan John. You know your prepositions. Who are you with, over, under, or around? Because this shapes how we are as leaders. So we were around kind of our family. Then the second thing he talked about is, what do you know? So you want to be discerning in your knowledge, but also continually be refining it. You want to be learning from credible sources. You want to trust your instincts when things come to that, and evaluate kind of what truly works as you're coaching. And in that, what do you know, he mentioned, really the key to progress is, no big surprise here, just steady, consistent effort, not any quick fixes. And then there's other things that he talked about, but I believe towards the end, what got me very emotional, and I think even him emotional, was this third part of how do you teach it? Because he was talking about trusting and honoring the traditions that you've come from and linking back to those foundations. And you could speak to him about it, but he was so connected to his family, his mother, his father, his siblings, his coaches that taught him, and he wanted to honor them. And he kind of talked a lot about what you do is honoring those people. And I remember it ended, applause, tears. I was blinking. I didn't have full crying, but I was doing the waving, the fanning my eyes. And then I called you and I just said, man, this guy is so good. He's so good. And it made me invest in this software where I was like, I have to pay back your parents who've taught me so much with Kung Fu and Tai Chi, and pay back Wah Lum in a way. Like I was like, we need to invest in this customer management software, whatever it's called. I was like, so I'm going to buy this. I'm going to do it. I'll take care of it. And you're like, anyway. But it was, all of that was from the emotions that he stirred for being like, honor where you came from, right? And this is where now I wanted to talk about this other thing that happened around the time of the Sifu certification.
Yes.
Okay, so.
Which happens all the time.
This happens all the time. Okay, so, fast forward, now I'm working in the office, helping things at the temple, and I answer a lot of emails, with other people. So I got this email around the time of the Sifu certification. We received an email from a student in another state, some martial artist in another state, saying something like, as the headquarters for Wah Lum, I'm practicing with so-and-so who teaches Wah Lum. So maybe you know them, but really, the main thing is I'm having this dilemma because I feel they did this one thing that was wrong. And, as the Wah Lum headquarters, what's your advice? So I of course emailed you and said, how, we talked about how we should respond, right? And then I decided, okay, we're just going to respond by saying, hey, please have an open conversation with your Sifu about whatever issue that you're having. However, we have no idea who this person is. They do not teach Wah Lum. And at the Wah Lum headquarters, we know this is happening all over the place by people who aren't certified to teach. So this was now I'm going to quote my email.
Okay.
Without mentioning names, because I don't want to be disparaging or make people feel bad, but basically I wrote, hey, by the way, great Grandmaster so-and-so has no association with Wah Lum Kung Fu. We are aware that he and his students are teaching Wah Lum curriculum without authorization, which we consider both disrespectful and dishonorable. This behavior goes against the values of respect and integrity that we uphold in our tradition. And then I just went onto our website, wahlum.com/schools, and I copied and pasted. This is exactly from our website. Wah Lum instructors are tested every 3 years to maintain the highest quality across all of our schools. Only the instructors listed below have been tested, certified, authorized, and qualified to teach the Wah Lum system. If you encounter anyone or any school not listed here claiming affiliation with the Wah Lum system, please be aware this is a false claim. Only those that are listed here have been sanctioned by Grandmaster Chan and the Wah Lum headquarters to teach our style, and it is considered disrespectful to teach Wah Lum without the approval of the Grandmaster and Wah Lum headquarters. You can also verify credentials, contact us, etc., etc. So that was my response to him, right?
Yes.
And,
pretty standard response.
Which is a pretty standard response, which we try not to disparage. You just say, there's no connection there. There's no there. There's no there. And we maintain our website showing this, and this is what our rules are. But we don't go out and search for this, right? The first point is to Wah Lum practitioners is we can't stop people teaching Wah Lum who aren't certified to do so. I don't know. It's just, I can't think of an analogy, but I just know that that's impossible.
Yeah, my only analogy would be like, oh, this was posted online on one of those XYZ social media. We need to make sure it's never going to appear on social media ever again. And once it's out there, everybody, it's gone, right? Like in the internets. It's just like wildfires, right? You just can't kind of control things that are out of your control. And so, being in therapy as long as I have, I've tried to start to move away from trying to be in control of things that are out of my control, right? And so this is probably an area where we just, as the headquarters, just say, yeah, well, thanks for letting us know. You're trying to verify information, and we're letting you know these people are legit. These people are not part of our organization. So.
Yeah, and so I guess that issue that I have is those people don't put Wah Lum anywhere on their website because they know they shouldn't, but yet in the circle of their school, they're saying, oh, we teach Wah Lum, right? And the main issue that I have is they're trying to make this connection to Wah Lum when there's no connection. Like they're trying to make a current connection to Wah Lum, to Grandmaster Chan, to you who is moving Wah Lum forward in a way that implies this is a current connection, and there's no connection there. There's none. There's no connection there. And so my analogy that I like is, as you know, I grew up in New York.
Yep, Brooklyn.
Brooklyn. And,
born and raised.
Born and raised. My sound check is always like, check it, and then I do a Biggie lyric, right? I'm not going to say it now. But we got most of our groceries from the corner store, the bodega, right? Like, here's $1 for milk. We had to buy like a gallon of milk every day, pretty much, 4 boys. But when we made our big groceries, we went to Pathmark. Pathmark, if you know, has a no-frill section, or at least it did in the 80s. I have not been in a Pathmark in many years because I moved down here in 94, right?
They probably still have a no-frill section.
But no frills growing up was basically like, oh, no frills, that's like the off-brand stuff, right? So I remember as a kid eating Honey Nut Cheerios, the real Honey Nut Cheerios, and being like, this is freaking amazing. It tastes so good. And my mom probably was like, all right, I'm going to get something for the kids. But she got Pathmark No Frills Honey Nut Tastios. And my point is that these schools are doing no frills 1980s Pathmark Wah Lum, and that's not Wah Lum. And I don't want it to be like, let me not insult you, but there's no connection there. The connection is there based on when we meet every 3 years, and it's not based on someone training for a few years 40 years ago and then saying, I now am also still authorized to teach Wah Lum, and you have a connection there. That is where I guess there's a lot of frustration on my end from.
Yeah, I feel like you are where I was 20 years ago when I was constantly seeing this happen to my father, because I am very protective over him, and I have this feeling that you are very protective over me.
Over you, yes.
And so what would happen was I would get really mad, actually, like angry, like visually angry, like kind of like Hulk throw things kind of angry. Like,
turn the table over.
Because it's so audacious, right? It's like so bold to just make claims. And back then there was no internet as much, right? Like it was just starting in 2000s, and like, so there wasn't really as much awareness, because it would be by phone. People would call and, hey, I'm trying to verify this. And we're like, we have no idea who this person is. But it was so angering to me, because I just felt like they were taking something that wasn't theirs.
Right.
Or they didn't have the honor and respect to do things the way Grandmaster Chan has asked for them to be done. And traditional Chinese Kung Fu is a family style, right? And so there's this specific protocol, tradition, and expectation for people. But I think one of the things that is top of mind, and literally one of these, 80s, whatever, people have actually said this, so be a little bit of a devil's advocate, is like, well, but if you go to college and you get a degree, or you go to school, then that knowledge is yours, right? And I was like, oh, so Western. It made me, I'm like, I'm totally American, right? But it makes you feel so, oh, that's such a Western way of thinking. Like, I take, and what's mine is mine. And so the question is, that was asked, and to be the devil's advocate, is, well, if you learn something, isn't it then yours? Like, don't you get to have ownership over that knowledge because you've earned it, or you've taken time with it? And especially if somebody maybe got a certificate, even if it was, say, 5 years ago or 10 years ago, they're going to go, well, I'm fairly current, right? Like, why can't I have ownership over this? Because it's physical, right? This is my material. It's not like I'm saying, oh, I wrote this book. Yeah. That's plagiarism, because there's law behind that, right? But this is more ethical question.
Yeah, but I guess to that point is, some of these people are still saying, well, I'm teaching Wah Lum. And you're, as students, you have a connection to that, where that they don't have that connection. And it goes back to what Dan John, of course, said way more eloquently than I'll try to say, is this fact of honoring the traditions of where you got that knowledge. So in a Western setting, in an academic setting, you're honoring the tradition of when you got your degree by going out and doing that. In the traditional Chinese martial arts, and the what we bow and baisan to the altar all the time, that's not honoring the tradition of what you learned. So that's where the big problem was. Yeah. And as always, I think I get very heated by two things. One, yes, if I feel I'm very overprotective of you, that's the one thing. And then two, when I catch that I did something really, really wrong. And I remember around the time of COVID, I was paying for this marketing company. Great group of guys who had a marketing company. And I said, oh, COVID hit. My personal training business is taking a hit. I'm not going to be able to invest all this money every month to keep working with you guys. Fast forward a couple of years, and there was a Google document that we shared, and they had put new information in there that I still had access to. And in a moment of just like, oh, let me get this, I started downloading stuff for about an hour. And then when I realized that they could see me doing that, I was so ashamed. You remember this. I don't get ashamed over a lot of things. I let things just I do get ashamed. I don't let things linger like that. And this was like weeks where I just kept thinking, why did I do that? Like, why was my instinct to immediately take? And so I remember I wrote them multiple emails just apologizing. Like, I feel so bad about this. And I think a big part of it is because we have these discussions on what we feel is how we show up with integrity. And I feel like for that hour, I didn't show up with integrity. And so then when I get an email like this, I get heated because, one, yes, I feel like there's this maybe a disrespect being done towards my father-in-law, but also my grandmaster, Master Chan, and to you, who is. But then also I remember like, damn it, and I also did that, but I knew I was wrong, and I emailed them and I apologized and I deleted, that stuff that I was like, oh, let me try to take this information, this new information. But I think those are two reasons why it affects me, because you try to live a life of integrity and you're always realizing how often you fail, which is human, right? Which is human.
Well, I was going to say, to err is human.
To err is
and
human.
So the important part of this is like the lessons that you learn. So kind of to just give some context to our listeners who are not actual Wah Lum students, because of course we hope you're still listening and you're hanging in there with us. But on our martial arts altar, to be clear, also an altar, it's like a place where we pay our respects to our ancestry, to our philosophy. It's not like a religious or sacrificial altar or anything like that, but basically every day we repeat the sayings that are very essential at our core. It's basically like saying our mission statement, right? But it is essential to us. And on that is things like respecting our grandmaster, our teachings, our style, having self-control, having kindness and learning kindness and fellowship, and how to work hard, and having these ethics like this. It's our moral code, and we find it to be the most important thing. We say it at the end of every class, so everyone leaves with that at top of mind.
Right.
And so for us to not live by that code is super hypocritical. Do we live by that code every moment and every second of the day? No, because we're humans, but we then have something to fall back on to go, wow, are we living up to this? No, then how can I be better? How can I apologize? How can I learn from the mistakes I will inevitably make? Like we are 100% going to make the mistakes. We're 100% not going to do the right thing. But then it's the people that are being called out or have been called out, then that continue to tell themselves whatever narrative they need to tell themselves to make it justifiable. And that's what really fascinates me. So I played devil's advocate because I said, well, people have asked these questions. Obviously, I think they're completely wrong. Obviously, you and I agree and have our opinions on this. I've just learned to be a bit calmer about it, because I realize that, one, you can't stop people from being this way. That's the whole like trying to control things you can't control. But I'm very interested in the narrative that people tell themselves. And again, don't want to go down the rabbit hole of doing such, but it's like, how can you, maybe even on their websites, they say, oh, we're martial artists. We teach you how to be respectful, how to have integrity. Like they love to say, oh, our kids programs teaches kids all these wonderful characteristics. And as a martial artist, I think that is one of the really biggest takeaways in what kind of character you're looking for. Someone with integrity and hard work ethic and having honor. Right. You look even back into like the old samurai code. It's like honor, all these words. And are they just words to people? Because how can you then sit there and put all these words out that are essentially meaningless if what you've done is disrespected a tradition and a lineage that comes from a very I don't want to use the word guarded or private, but it comes from a very specific style. Like our Wah Lum style is Grandmaster Chan's now to do with as he sees is the right thing. And what he decided was he was going to share it. And that then opened us up to these issues. Yeah. So, but at the same time, the benefit outweighed the negative, which was so many people have been moved and enriched by Wah Lum and the practice and the knowledge of it. And we just try to look at the greater good versus the negative side. But basically, it is absolutely not condoned, okay. And if we aren't calling you to tell you so, it's not an endorsement. It is not basically us telling you that where you're okay to continue doing what you're doing. We absolutely think it's the highest form of disrespect to Grandmaster Chan and all of the teachings. Right.
And I think that is why when I had, there's that, this lack of honor made me think of the ancient samurais, like, oh, now I must commit. Like that's how much I felt that with that instance with that.
Of course, we watched Shogun, by the way.
Yeah, Shogun is amazing.
Well, we chose to watch that instead of the election night. So.
Right. So
we're at the end of the election night. We also.
but that's kind of like how I felt. Oh, I've dishonored this thing that I value so much. And also, to use my Kung Fu brother, Matt, Sifu Matt Martin, certified Wah Lum instructor in Raleigh, North Carolina. I remember we were having a discussion, and we were talking just about how much we value what we do with Wah Lum, and it was like, yeah, man, because this shit really matters. And I remember he said that, and I was like, yes, that is exactly, and because of that, it sounds like we're getting heated about it, but it's because we feel that matters, and also because I've known all of us, like, we failed in upholding those things sometimes, but then realizing, okay, I was wrong there. I was wrong there, and I need to try to make it right. And so I always am just fascinated to, like how you said, how do people justify it? Because right now, we had someone who recently didn't recertify, right? They had a school internationally. Maybe they're watching right now. And this person said they left kind of on good terms, like saying, I'm leaving, I'm not able to continue doing this for whatever their reasons are. Maybe they're good or not, not good, but they're leaving Wah Lum. I'm going to just teach Chinese culture. Are they now teaching Wah Lum, like right now as we're recording this? Maybe, but we don't know. We're not going to go searching for that, right? Because it's impossible to search that. There's probably people who, when you talked about we talked about this magical moment that just happened in November, who were part of that 2024 certification, who for whatever reason may leave Wah Lum right now. And I always wonder, are they going to do it with integrity? Are they going to honor the traditions will they remember the things that Dan John talked about, like, who are you? Yeah, like, know who you are, know where you came from, honor those traditions. Like, I don't know the answer to that. But what I do know is that we won't be spending time searching for that, right? We will just try to do the best that we can for our students.
Yeah, I think
right?
Ultimately people will bring up these issues and questions to us, or hey, especially if we have schools where we've got one of those no-frill schools that opens right next door or in the area. So that becomes where we're now protective over our schools to make sure that people know who is sanctioned, who is not. That is where we kind of will make a stance and kind of be a bit more vocal. But I think our focus is much more best served by being intentional to the people who are doing things the right way, and instead of giving all this energy to the negative side of the people that are just going to drain you, because you can't actually convince anyone with facts. You can't actually convince anybody who has told themselves they are the hero of their own story, which is a thing that you've said many, many times in a lot of the MiOsc episodes. But basically, they will tell themselves their own narrative to make it fit what is quote unquote right in their head. And I think ultimately no one is going to just say, well, I'm just going to be a bad person.
No.
So they'll tell whatever story they need to make themselves out to not be that bad person. And it's not just good or bad, but it's essentially, am I doing something that is ethically wrong or against the traditions of Wah Lum Kung Fu? And the answer to that is mostly yes. When they choose to make these decisions, it's almost always going to be yes, unless they're doing it the right way. There's a very clear path that's been laid for people to learn and teach in our style the right way, and that is to come and be a part of the family. If you don't want to be a part of the family, then you don't need to be. But essentially, if you want to be part of the family, there is a right way to do it.
So the last note that I have from that lecture for Dan John, and these are just notes that, again, and I take sometimes notes and then go, how can then I make it relate to Wah Lum? And it was like building on this legacy as instructors. One of those lessons Dan John talked about is us thriving as a community, not in isolation, which is what I think makes the Wah Lum Kung Fu organization so strong, is that we do have a very tight-knit community of the certified instructors who are there and all the students. But just to remember to, like, honor the traditions, honor where you came from and the people that you taught, but then we really believe that what we're teaching is helping expand people's, like, lives, possibilities. That we're trying to help people live with integrity, with purpose. We're trying to leave like a stronger, more connected community. So with all of that, segue to taking advantage of the energy of a new year, 2025, but also the Lunar New Year, which will be on the 29th of January. year of the snake. There's beliefs of like, oh, New Year's resolutions are worthless, but I think there's a lot of value in taking advantage of that energy of the new year to kind of maybe start putting your focus. You don't have to like rewrite your whole life, but you can think about, well, what do I want to do in 2025? And so a lot of the things that we get with Kung Fu and Tai Chi students, or maybe even fitness enthusiasts, or just the general public is, what are my goals going to be for 2025? So let's maybe talk about that. How do we help Wah Lum practitioners or not, or no frills Wah Lum practitioners? How do we help people accomplish what their goals are or their intentions are for 2025?
I like to really think of it instead of like a New Year's resolution, because to me it's less about the fact that this calendar year, I mean, is there really a difference between December 31 and January 1? But what I think is super significant, and I hadn't thought about it before till I was just sitting in here, is pretty much that it's because like from November 20 something, when we have Thanksgiving, or you maybe backing up to like Halloween, right? There's all this stuff happening that throws one off routine, because there is, okay, we're going to have this crazy meal where we all sit for several hours with the turkey and whatever. Oh, but that's going to happen again in a couple weeks. But also people are in town for the holidays. There's going to be cocktail hours. And it's just a very unroutine time, like where people can be off the routine. And so to me, if like throughout the year, it just feels a little bit more, how do you say, normal, I guess, for parents. Right? If you're on a school schedule, then oh God, that's the summer. Oh, it's the back to school period. So you have your own little built-in pockets of madness. But I think from that end of November all the way through December, because it's the holidays and there's people who are off work, there's no kids are off school, there's just this lack of routine. So I think what that does is actually throw us off our discipline a bit, right? So it takes us out of the mindset of we need to kind of keep this consistency, which, as you said, like first thing out of the podcast was, oh, surprise everybody, the most successful way to reach your goals or to accomplish things is to be consistent over time and keep practicing. But I think what happens there, it's like, that's why the new year is like, okay, all that is behind us. Okay, we're through all that. No more cocktail parties, blah, 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 right? And for us at Wah Lum, it's, oh God, we're in Lunar New Year mode, right? So it's all shows and it's crazy. So we're still off routine in a sense, but our routine now is very much like related to performance and being able to execute. So it's a more focused discipline kind of thing. So it's, I think, versus it just being a New Year thing, I think it's coming out of chaos and going back into something that's going to be a little more regimented, but not so strict. I don't know if that's the right word, but to be able to find our focus so that we are able to thrive even if things try to throw us off routine, maybe.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so it made me think about something I learned from someone else, another good business coach named Pat Rigsby, who kind of said, oh, you know what, break things down into 6-week cycles works really well for him. And I think a mistake that we've all made for the new year is thinking, here's what I'm going to do for the year. So you can maybe have, let's say, a grand vision, grand goal, grand intention for the year, but then you're going to have to start breaking things down. And so you could look at, here's kind of the big thing that I want to accomplish, but let me just look at, I'm going to work on this thing for 6 weeks. You don't even have to break down every quarter, because what happens is during the course of those 6 weeks, you may decide this is not what I really want to do. But 6 weeks, I think, of focused work can give you an idea if you're on the right path. You can start seeing some progress of what you need. So that's one thing, is maybe instead of looking at the whole year, by December 2025, like one of the first things that I did around Christmas time is I invested in Pimsleur language. By December, we got that Cantonese down, Nei sik sik tang. So anyway, right? Those are like 2 lessons that I learned, right? So you say a couple sentences and you're like, oh, I learned anything, but that's besides the point. More of thinking about whatever people want to achieve usually means that they have to build certain skills to achieve that. So let's take Kung Fu or Tai Chi. You could take something in Tai Chi, which I think is pretty tough, is the low single whip, especially if you're coming into Tai Chi a little bit older. But then also in Wah Lum, we have a very similar move we call side to side, which is kind of a lateral type lunge.
Yeah, and for our Wah Lum practitioners, I mean, it starts as early as third exercise where we hit into
Right.
that poke mile.
And it's a challenging, really challenging move. So let's just take a move like that that's similar on both sides. And then if you were to look at fitness, it's like, oh, that's just a lateral lunge. Right? Your father, Grandmaster Chan, made that side to side, like butt to the floor, knee down, back straight. He took it to like the nth level.
It's so weird that my father, Grandmaster Chan, takes things to the nth level.
Right.
It's just not his style at all.
So he kind of took it to the next level. But let's just break down, like, okay, the first thing is you have to think about where you're at right now, and then say, okay, well, to get a side to side, I need to have mobility in my adductors, my hips. Let's just talk about the hips. So I need to maybe do some work on my hips. Maybe that's your limiting factor. Maybe your limiting factor is your ankles. Maybe your limiting factor is your spine. You can tackle one of these things as a skill that you need to improve, but the skills then have to be converted to daily actions. And so the first part, I think, I'm going to use myself, not you wonderful people out there, but I'm going to use myself as where I've made mistakes. First part, thinking of the goal as like, here's where I'm going to be in 2025. And then the year happens and I didn't make. So first step is, let's break it down to 6 weeks. The second thing is, this is a skill. Really identify the skill that I'm trying to learn and then break it down into daily actions. So I've learned, okay, I need the skill. Now, what are the daily actions? Well, I could be doing something that simulates a side-to-side motion at my level and work towards that daily. And then the next thing where I have failed as well is thinking that I need to allot a big chunk of time to improve. So here's something that you and I, based on how busy we were preparing for the Sifu certification, did, is we were just getting up throughout the day for a minute sometimes, 2 minutes here and there, 5 minutes, okay, 15 minutes, just separate different times of giving little impulses, little tastes of a specific skill that we were trying to work on, that then over the course of a week, you're like, oh, I've got this thing down. Over the course of 6 weeks, wow, I've really improved. Then you reevaluate, you do it again, and you can really move forward that way if you take these kind of bite-sized chunks. So does that make sense as far as like breaking things down into smaller increments that are chewable maybe?
Yeah, I think the key there is a lot of people have overload. So if you look at, oh gosh, I have this whole program I have to do, or even like, for example, I'm trying to do a program that Coach Oscar has me on, and I'm like, oh, there's 3 action items for today or whatever. So I actually am looking at things as like, let me see what I can do today. And if I can do it today, great. And if not, like the next day, I'm like, I didn't do that. So I'm on today again. Like it could be just like a reset for every day, but I do know what you mean by it's important to try to give yourself like a small set amount of time and short-term goal, because that's much more attainable and palatable. Like it's more digestible to oh, I think I can make it in that amount of time. But I think for a lot of people, the day just goes like this. And so to think about your item that you're working on, whether it's a physical item, whether it's a habit you're trying to build, whether it's, I want to drink 1 more glass of water or whatever it is, I think you just have to see like, one of the things that you talked about in your coaching all the time is like, what would be so easy for me to do that you'd be like, yeah, I can absolutely do that. So for you or me, it'd be like, okay, we can do 1 minute.
We could definitely do a minute.
Definitely do a minute. And then, so you do your minute and then maybe it turns into 5 or maybe it turns into 10 and that's great. But then the next day, I don't know that you should say, oh, I need to do 5 or 10 because that's what I did yesterday, right? So it's really important to take the minute win, but also that day is gone. And if you didn't do it, then, your clock resets. That's the new day. And that's what you try to tackle that day and not get so caught up in what I didn't get to do or what I missed or what I wasn't able to accomplish. And now I'm behind, right? Because you're only where you're at. You can only progress from where you start. You can't go backwards in time. If you can, let me know. It would be really interesting to have you on my podcast. But yeah, I think the 6-week plan is good, making it bite-sized, but really when it comes down to it, making sure that whatever the one day, the daily task is, or whatever the task is, that you look at your schedule and be reasonable, because what happens is I think a lot of people get super excited. They're like, oh yeah, I can commit to this or this or this. And And then when you don't do it, you're even more upset. And then the whole program goes out the window.
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is be a little bit more forgiving of yourself. Treat yourself the way you would treat a friend. To use an example, like I was thinking about something I just did today, is the amazing Sifu 2, who's one of the most senior instructors, not just at the temple, but in the system, right?
Yeah.
He's a disciple of Grandmaster Chan. He was doing your Kung Fu brother. He was doing a workshop on double broadswords. Probably one of the most stolen Wah Lum forms out there.
Yeah, well, I mean, there is a book.
So stolen isn't right, but
technically, I guess if someone learned from a book, they're like, well, you put the information out there, but it really was originally for Wah Lum practitioners.
Right. Okay, so sorry, I couldn't help myself. So anyway, what was really cool about that workshop is like, here are some basics. Basic 1, basic 2, basic 3, basic 4. Okay, now let's break this form down into sections. Section 1, section whatever, blah, blah, blah. Today, I was like, I've got to get this work. Sorry, I brought this with me. I was like, today I was like, I've got to get this work done. So I started working on things, and I was like, but I did say that to myself and committed that I was going to work on double broadswords. So I have a pair here. I got the double broadswords out, and literally for a minute, I did a minute of those basics. Set it down, went back to work, and then I did it again. So I've done 2 minutes. But I can tell you that those 2 minutes are way better than me spending the entire week trying to find 30 minutes to an hour to practice. That will help me more when it's time for me then to practice it in a longer term in a class setting. And so as a student, Kung Fu or Tai Chi, if you look at whatever you're trying to improve, if it's a Wah Lum form, great. If it's a Tai Chi form, if it's your own personal style of martial arts or fitness, look at what you're trying to improve, try to break those down into different skills. Like, this is a skill that I need to work on. And then that skill is like, okay, then what's a habit that can be daily? And then just remember, to your point, that daily means where you can realistically fit it in and for how long.
Yeah.
And that will add up. Using Dan John again, but he wrote something about like, I wrote this New Year's resolution thing about like, hey, your goal should be to weigh 1 pound less, or to not weigh 1 pound more. It's an amazing, actually, super smart way to think about it, because most people end the year going, where do these 10 pounds come from? or whatever reason. But making kind of realistic goals, and then even at a certain age, making goals that are like, I'm just not going to decline this year.
Yeah, well,
Right?
we actually, and I think we talked about this before, had dinner with a lovely, lovely, lovely couple that we adore in their 80s, and he's like, well, I've never changed my routine. I do the exact same strength routine
From
that
his
I've been
50s.
doing for like 30 years, which means like if you were lifting, let's just say like, doing a 50-pound blah, 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 in your 80s, you're still doing that. That's freaking amazing. So it's really a smart way to be. It's like, well, I've never lost that skill, which makes you stay, if you think about it, it's like as strong as he was when he was 50.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. So yeah, I think there's this thought that your goal has to be meaning you achieved more or gotten higher kicks or done a higher number of something, but essentially sometimes maintaining is winning.
Celebrate maintaining sometimes.
Maintaining. This is coming from the 40-bit Fu group, obviously.
Yeah.
Like, we're like, oh, okay, in your 20s, it's a little bit different. And I will say that for our very young practitioners, if we've got teenagers listening, it's a bit different for you. You have a different trajectory because you can push a bit more. I'm guessing that you don't have like a whole work life and a whole career and a family to support and all these things. Like your capacity is very different when you're younger. So I think those goal setting can be a bit more aggressive and a bit different in terms of like the realism that's there. But like for those of us who are, on the other side of the rainbow, as my dad says, then you have to be realistic.
Right.
And looking at it that way, where it's like, wait, I'm exactly where I was, is not such a bad thing. Because if you've been doing that for 20 years and you're saying, wow, I'm still as fit as I was when I was 20, like I would have, oh wow, that would be an amazing thing. I'm definitely not there, but I'm not flipping around anymore, jumping off buildings. So that was all in the past. But I think that's a really good reframe.
Yeah.
And one thing I didn't intend, because I don't even know, I didn't even check with you before this, for this to be any kind of sales plug, but I know that you do coaching and planning for this, and you can actually give people programs Is that a thing? Are you taking people or
So,
not really?
so you know what? Because so funny, right? Because the theme of this is all integrity, I won't make a plug on that.
Okay.
If you want to contact us, you know how to contact us.
Okay.
But yes, I do coach people. But I think the thing is, I'll speak for myself, right? I have a strength training coach.
Yeah.
Brett Jones, dude is amazing. Hey, listen, if you want to learn strength training, reach out to this guy. He's like one of the greatest coaches on the planet. Anyway, I stay consistent with that training because I schedule consistent meetings with him. I'll feel like crap if I don't do what I discuss with him. So just 2 days ago, I had my
So are you saying accountability is helpful?
Just 2 days ago, I had my check-in with him, talked about what the training was, talked about what I had been doing, through the holidays, setbacks, where I was at, set a plan, immediately been following that plan.
Right.
And I have another checkup the following month. And so will this month be perfect? No, but it's much more likely that I will be consistent because I know I have to check in. And I think that's a value also of going to school.
A school.
Like
yes. Showing up to class. Let us
so at Wah Lum,
do the hard work for you in terms of you show up. Just show up and then we will get you.
Show up is step one. So
show up is step one.
So yes, I do coaching remotely and I do in person. Yes. But for one thing that we've never done, and I just don't see how we could do it, is offer a online course. I'm not talking about remote coaching through Zoom, right? Like where you're still coaching someone, because that's fine. But I think for Wah Lum, I just don't see, here's a Wah Lum course online that's just out there for anyone to take, because that then allows for all the things that we talked about at the beginning of the podcast to happen or to get worse.
I was talking about habit building,
but
like
right.
how you were saying, like
right.
New Year's goal. And
Yes,
I was
yes.
Like, oh, we didn't really talk about this, but I mean, I do know that you have a couple clients that they're like, all right, here we go, and you do the 6-week plan for them, because I think it's great. We've given you all the information you all need, but I don't know how many people are really going to do it.
So here's the thing.
So the point being, accountability is important too.
Yeah,
so whether that's your Sifu, whether that's another coach you have, but it is, yeah. I think that we didn't talk about the component of, oh, by the way, you don't have to do that alone.
Correct. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, the coaching, the accountability part is super important, right? That's the first step is you making this kind of decision. Here's what I'm going to do. To be successful, you do something consistently. In order to be consistent, a huge component is some form of accountability, which can be done with a coach, with a Sifu, with going to school. But then the real magic happens within you still working out on your own. So I want people to understand that, we want for you to come, let's say you're a student who comes in and does training twice a week. And that's all that you have time for, but just realize that there's 186, 7 hours in a week. If 2 of those hours are to training and the rest are, you're not thinking about it at all, you will get some input, some improvement, but you're not going to progress as fast. So you just need to be realistic. And so that part of can you throw in a minute here and there, it'll enhance your progress so much. So I guess there's all these layers, right, of how to improve.
I think it sounds silly, but we've even told our students, hey, if you're going to get up from the couch to the kitchen, that's an opportunity to do something on the way, right? So what we don't want to hear for you to just basically make excuses and just say, well, I don't have any time to do it, right? So we're saying 30 seconds, 1 minute, whatever that means for you, even if it's 10 seconds, it's better than no seconds, and those do add up over time. So don't be discouraged by those of you with very, very busy lives.
Which now brings me to the final point is, maybe not the final point, because who knows how long we'll talk, but a really key point is you deciding what you have to give up in order to achieve the goal that you want.
TikTok.
So for me,
give it up.
I would say 2024, around this time of year, all the way through October, I did a really good job of going to bed, let's say through almost November, right before the holidays, before everything got disrupted, of going to bed around 9 o'clock. But right from the holidays, from Thanksgiving on, I kind of lost that. We lost a few the consistency that you were talking about. But what I decided was like, oh, I have to give up that hour that I was giving to TV post 9 o'clock if I want to sleep better, which will then allow me to function better as an adult. Because I've had conversations with students or clients where we're talking about the how amazing the TV show The Last of Us was, and then segue, which is an amazing show, and then segue into, but I just don't have the time. I was like, yo, man, we just talked about the whole season of this show, right? You and I both.
So you can stretch while watching the show. You should still watch The Last of Us, by the way. Don't cut that out.
Don't cut that out. But like, don't talk to me about
don't make excuses.
How great that last Netflix show or whatever show was, and then follow it immediately. It's like, I just don't have the time.
Yeah, I think that is one of our pet peeves, if you want to call it that. But when people tell us that, because we're all busy. We're not going to say we're busier than you or et cetera, et cetera.
Everyone's busy.
Everybody has things to do. And I think if you just admit to yourself, first of all, that you are prioritizing one thing over another, then that's still your choice, right? And so, yes, if you've had the time to do anything, that might constitute as, well, could I have been doing my broadsword flowers at that moment? Yes, then just don't make excuses, because that's also setting yourself up for failure, because this is the tough love part, the Sifu Mimi side coming through. You have to be honest with yourself and hold yourself accountable too, especially if you're not getting into class or you don't have a coach and be okay with that, but accept that it is your fault if you're not getting it done, right? And so, but make realistic goals. So don't be so hard on yourself because you can't accomplish this amazing new thing when that's not going to be, feasible for your lifestyle. So don't make excuses. Be realistic.
Be kind to yourself.
Yes. Have a good new year.
So
peace out, 2025. All right, guys.
Hopefully we didn't come off as too preachy in the beginning or even negative, right? I don't know. I have no idea sometimes how we come across. But the main thing, if we could bring it all back to, is our goal. My goal for myself, speaking for both of us, our goal is to honor the tradition of what and who taught us in the best way possible.
Yeah.
And so the goals that I set for 2025, my intention is going to be, maybe I'm just thinking of this right now, my intention is going to be, let me think of that first. Am I going to be knowing who I am, honoring where I came from, honoring the traditions that circle back to that, and then doing the actions daily that move towards that. And so that's my ending. The end.
All right, everybody. Thank you. I want to just do a sidebar because I've been doing a lot of Patreon posts and letting people know it's just been a little crazy. Those of you who tuned into my first episode of the new year, you'll also have heard some of those posts that I went ahead and verbalized to you to let you know my schedule is a little bit off, and to honor my time and myself, I'm also not necessarily going to be like every single week something's coming out, but there's like over 300 episodes. I'm sure you haven't heard all of them unless you're Aaron or a couple of the others of you out there.
One or two people
I've that have literally listened to every episode. But I think that if you'll be patient with me, I promise I'm still going to have a lot of content. Like he just said, I'm talking to Coach Dan John later today, and still some of our favorite guests that are recurring, and I'm still going to be talking to all of our favorite like comics people and all the people I enjoy talking to, and we will do more MiOsc episodes by popular demand. But also I want to tell you I do appreciate everybody for tuning in. I do hope you've had a really good holiday New Year, and also I don't know when this is going to drop, but Lunar New Year is around the corner, so stay tuned on the Wah Lum and Sifu Mimi Chan social medias or whatnot to see some lion dancing and a little bit of the firecrackers enjoy. It's going to be a wild time. So we'll see you next time.
That's all for today's episode. Thanks for listening to the Sifu Mimi Chan Show. Please subscribe and rate my podcast on your platform of choice and leave a review. You can become a patron of the show at patreon.com/SifuMimiChan to help keep this podcast going. Follow me and interact on social media at Sifu Mimi Chan on Instagram or Facebook.